Punctuated equilibrium. Most evolution is gradual, small changes over long periods of time. But in some cases, new species can appear or disappear suddenly. This type of evolution is known as punctuated equilibrium. This usually happens in a cataclysmic event, like there's a comet or something that causes an extreme environmental change. In this case, evolution has to happen very quickly. The sudden appearance or disappearance may not be as sudden as thought. Speciation may have occurred during time periods too short to be distinguished in fossil layers. Because remember, fossil layers form over long periods of time. If it happens quickly, even a couple hundred years instead of 1,000, it may be too quick for this to appear in the fossil record. Speciation. How do new species form? Members of the same species share a common set of genes called a gene pool. This means genetic change in one individual can spread through the population by interbreeding. For a new species to form, members of the population must become genetically separated from one another until the genes can no longer flow between them. So for example, on the left we have a population of beetles that all appear to be some shade of brown, and then a genetic barrier is set up between them. That could be an actual physical barrier perhaps. It's anything that stops the groups of beetles from interbreeding with each other. So now we have two groups of beetles that don't interbreed anymore. And on the top here we have some beetles that are a slight shade of green. Very subtle, but it's there. And over time, this green allele may become more common in one population but not the other. And then ultimately what we have is two separate kinds of beetles, ultimately leading to their speciation. The green beetle and the brown beetle. Causes of speciation. How do populations become reproductively isolated from one another so that the genes cannot flow between them? There is behavioral isolation, geographic isolation, temporal isolation, and mechanical isolation. Behavioral isolation. Behavioral isolation occurs when two populations are capable of interbreeding but have behaviors that prevent mating. Some species of crickets are physically identical, but can be distinguished by the fact that females will only respond to the mating songs of males of their own species. Males of other species are ignored. Geographic isolation. This occurs when two populations are separated by geographic barriers like mountains or bodies of water. Take for example the Grand Canyon. There's different species of squirrels across the canyon because they can no longer interbreed with that canyon. And islands are separated by bodies of water. So take for example the Galapagos Islands. Perhaps this is one reason why Darwin was able to observe species that were so much different from each other on different islands, more different from each other than they were from their ancestral species. Temporal isolation. This occurs when two different populations mate at different times. Two populations of plants may produce flowers in different seasons, making mating between the populations impossible. For example, the winter pansies flower during the winter, and the summer pansies flower during the summer. Another example are frogs. Different species of frogs will mate at different times during the spring and summer. So a frog that mates during the spring will not mate with a different species of frog that mates during the summer. Mechanical isolation. This occurs when the sexual organs between members of closely related yet different species do not fit together. For some different and physically incompatible species of fruit flies, interbreeding can result in injury or death.